But again, it doesn't have to be practiced currently to have an effect. American slavery is a great example. It hasn't been practiced in 200 years, but the effects of slavery are still there and ongoing. If Dhimmitude ended hundreds of years ago, why do the Jews still have dhimmi status? And how does this impact the Gaza situation today? I want to explain that. I'm going to unpack that. And before I do, I want to begin with, when you're dealing with situations like this, to make sure we're not bringing to the discussion our own stereotypes. I think there's two ways these stereotypes can manifest themselves. You can, it's distorted in two opposite ways. One way is the perception Islam can do no right. In other words, they're looking at the situation with an interpretive grid of suspicion. And so these people are willing to always believe the worst of Islam and the worst of Muslims. The other side of this is by distorting Islam by using the grid obligatory respect. And so they're not willing to look or evaluate properly some of the misgivings of Islam or Muslims. I said that is also a stereotype that should be dismissed. What we should try to do, attempt to do as we best can, is give it an objective analysis of what it is. So that's what I want to talk to you about today, and to kind of stay away from stereotypes as we evaluate this information about Dhimmitude. Because Dhimmitude, let me use the illustration of American slavery. American slavery ended 200 years ago, but the residual effects are still alive and well today. There's been many great things happening. We've had an African American president, an African American vice president, but still the dehumanization element that was done hundreds of years ago still has its effects. And the reason why is a worldview has been created. And these are the ideas we hold dear. And worldviews are cognitive frameworks that provide a grid for finding truth in the world around us. And so now let's see how that worldview is manifested by understanding this concept of Dhimmitude. As I alluded to in my opening illustration, that these ideas have systemic effects when it comes to attitudes of Islam regarding Israel. And I think a big part of that is in the historical context of fitna, which I cover in a different video, and Dhimmitude, along with societal attitudes and narratives, which I outline in the essential prerequisites of understanding the problem, may have contributed to a perpetual negative stereotypes and prejudices against the Jews. And these stereotypes will include they were deceitful, untrustworthy, and unloyal. Now, I also want to defeat a stereotype that's often done by American evangelicals. and that is this: Israel can do no wrong. And so they should be held accountable for their actions as well. And individuals should be held accountable, whether they be in the army, if their actions are against the law, let's say. I think as a Christian, I believe that we're all fundamentally flawed, that we live in a fallen world, and that there's no pristine countries or movements or anything like that, and that wrongs should be held accountable. So I don't want to ignore some of the things that Israel has done wrong. That's not my point. But I want to do is draw those things that shape the worldview. And the power of worldview has really an influence, because that's the lens by which we see and judge the world. And it represents the ideas that we hold clear. And worldviews are cognitive frameworks that provide a grid for finding the truth in the world around us. Oftentimes, though, our minds refuse to accept contrary ideas. So I think it's important for us to be open and honest where we're at, and to make sure we're discerning the ideas properly. Now, what is the concept of Dhimmitude? And why is it important for understanding on the Gaza situation? Okay? Now remember, Allah promises success in this life and the life to come, if someone's life is submitted to His will. Those who don't submit to Allah are subject to judgment, both in this life and the life to come. And Muslims are to be the winners of history, and consequently, since Israel has resisted the Muslim tradition, then they are the losers of history. And so the concept of Dhimmitude describes the status of non-Muslims living under Muslim rule. And this holds significant historical and theological importance. We need to understand the concepts of Dhimmitude in the concept of Islam and how it treats those who are aliens versus how the Torah treats those who are aliens. Now, in a biblical perspective, or a Jewish perspective, in the Torah, there are very detailed instructions for the Israelites how to interact with non-believers. I'm going to share with you two scriptures here that I think are important. Leviticus 19:33 and 34. And if a stranger dwells with you in your land, you shall not mistreat him. The stranger who dwells among you shall not be to you as one born among you, or shall be to you as one born among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So what he's telling them then is, hey, you should treat them just like they were born among you. And so there's a compassionate response to the alien. Exodus 23:9. Also, you shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the heart of a stranger, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. He's drawing in their experience of being in the foreign land of Egypt and say, hey, you know what it was like to be like that. Don't be that way here, okay? And so they emphasize these verses, the importance of not mistreating aliens and treating them as being native born. The instructions establish outsiders in Israel should be treated with the same kindness and justice. As well, mistreatment of aliens is listed among the sins that brings God's judgment. Okay? So this is important in our contrast. Sometimes contrast is the mother of clarity, is what Os Guinness once said. Now, in Dhimmitude, the alien has three choices. He can either convert to Islam, submit to Islam under Islamic authority, in other words, become a dhimmi. He pays a poll tax, and in that poll tax, he, for 1 year, is not under the judgment, and they can live within the Muslim context as long as they pay the jizya, and that's a tax. So there's conversion to Islam, submission to Islam by becoming a dhimmi, or the third one is death. And so the concept of jihad is central to this mission, as it seeks to extend the power and rule of Islam. It ensures to extend that rule in Islamic countries. Now, the Dhimmitude is not practiced anymore, but you see its teaching emphasized over as late as the 20th century. But again, it doesn't have to be practiced currently to have an effect. American slavery is a great example. It hasn't been practiced in 200 years, but the effects of slavery are still there and ongoing. And what Dhimmitude did, it's the precedent that Muhammad set for the treatment of conquered peoples. They were called to pay a tribute and other taxes, but they were in positions of servitude. They were living under the strict laws of Sharia. And so that's important to understand. So as we draw on this, again, the concept that Israel should be the losers of history because they should be subjected to Islam because of Islam's position in the world according to Muhammad. When you see evidence that counters this, it causes some cognitive dissonance. And but we also see here the contrast between what the Bible teaches on aliens and what Islam teaches on aliens. Now, I would say in America, what the Bible teaches about aliens is not always practiced here. So I think that's fair to say. However, the Torah emphasizes things like empathy, justice, and equal treatment. Islamic teaching highlights non-reciprocity, submission, and the imposition of tribute to non-Muslims. You would actually, every year, you would accept the jizya, and you would get slaps on the back of the neck. Symbolic means if you didn't submit to Islam's authority, there would be decapitation. And so it was very much a position inferiority that was there. And so the reason why there's a resistance towards a Jewish state is the fact that Jews have dhimmi status, and that feelings of superiority there. Remember, you have the Middle East, all dominated by Muslim countries. You have a little piece of land, and that little piece of land is about as big as New Jersey. And Islam, many Muslims don't think the Jews have a right to, so they're generally, they're against, when you look at Muslims worldwide, they're against a two-state solution. The reason being is because the ramifications of Dhimmitude still exist today.